Hi, my name is Shaman Joffrey. I'm going to be talking about microplastics in food, and I'm going to be talking about the ethics regarding microplastics as well. So, what are microplastics? Microplastics are microscopic pieces of plastics. They're essentially found anywhere. They're found in your gut, my gut, fish, salt, food, whatever. Some sources of microplastics include textiles like shirts, pants, car tires, beauty products, etc., etc. And they're essentially divided into two types of microplastics. They're divided into primary and secondary microplastics. Primary microplastics are essentially designed to be microscopic. This includes things like microchips, like in your computer, like plastic transistors. Um, Secondary microplastics are caused by the degradation of plastic. And these types of plastics, they end up further breaking it down into nanoplastics, which can get into our cells and affect our cells. Microplastics in food. There might be many side effects on human health from digested microplastics. There are a lot of confirmed effects on the food web, uh, like the microplastics going up through trophic levels. Um, Most microplastics come from consumption comes from water, crustaceans, mollusks, fish, and salt, and people might be ingesting 100,000 microplastic particles each day. The effects of microplastics on human health. So we know the effects of plasticizers, stabilizers, and pigments. These compounds have a very negative effect on our endocrine system, which is our hormonal system. Uh, Things like nanoplastics may cause harm at a cellular level. However, these nanoplastics cannot be measured. It's like looking at a needle in a haystack, in a sense that you will never be able to measure it. You'll never be able to find it. However, they are there, and they may be affecting our human health. Now, the long-term effects of microplastics on humans haven't been very well studied, as there has not been a standardization of the research methods to measure microplastics in humans and plants and other animals. Some possible effects of microplastics could be the disruption of our digestive system, circulatory system, and respiratory system. Microplastics may damage our DNA, especially nanoplastics, and it may increase our risk of cancer. Uh, Change in hormones, especially like testosterone, and it may be a threat to male fertility. As we see with the age of plastic, the Y chromosome in male has been shrinking, and it may be correlated with the Y chromosome of the male human. And this is just a way that, refining in factories is a way that microplastics enter our entire system. Foods that are affected by microplastics include fish, crustaceans, mollusks, fish, water, and salt. And these are the type of foods that have the highest concentration of microplastics. Other high concentrations include dairy products, vegetables, and soft drinks. Regarding water, essentially, tap water has a lot less microplastic concentration than bottled water. That makes sense because bottled water is plastic, and so it will inevitably have microplastics inside of it. Tap water is more refined and goes through a very large process. Um, so microplastics are almost always removed from the tap water before people drink from it. Regarding food packaging, in Europe there are regulations regarding plastic packaging. However, a lot of these regulations do not address microplastics, as there's no very general definition of microplastics. Now, the regulation do allow some microplastics, but it cannot affect the food itself, like the taste, the chemical compounds within the food. But inevitably, everyone is consuming microplastics. Now, how do the microplastics get from your plastic packaging into your food? Well, simply by the degradation of the packaging. Packaging, plastic packaging will almost always release microplastics, and the products after the degradation process includes formaldehyde, benzene, and acrolein, which could be harmful to human health. Microplastics in marine life. In Chile, they sampled 80% of Decapiteris maridasi, and they found that it ingested some amount of microplastics, no surprise. However, they found out that it ingested microplastics similar to those of its prey. And the research essentially implied that microplastics move up the food chain, hence why almost everything has microplastics in it. There's 26 different fish species off the red coast of Saudi Arabia was also studied. They found that 14.6% of the sampled fish had microplastics. Countries like China researched their oysters, and they found that 84% of the sampled oysters had microplastics in them. Now, a lot of these numbers, they vary a lot, and this could be due to the fact that there's still no standardization of the methods to track the microplastics in animals. Regarding microplastics in marine life, there was a study conducted in the Zhoushan fishing ground, and they found that 124 fish were almost studied, and almost all of them had microplastics. However, the Zhoushan study showed that the microplastic and trophic level are correlated because a lot of the fish that were at a higher trophic level had a higher concentration of microplastics. And they found that as the trophic levels increased, so did the concentration of microplastics in the fish. So since humans are very high in the food chain, this implies that we may have a high concentration of microplastics in our bodies. Now, the ethics of microplastics. So, a lot of third world countries lack access to clean drinking water, so they need to use plastic water bottles in order to get access and drink clean drinking water because their tap water system is very underdeveloped. So, this increases the microplastics, and a lot of these third world countries or developing countries are trying to keep up with the demand. And this leads to the fact that a lot of these developing countries like Malaysia have a waste management system that is very inadequate. So the plastic gets taken care of through domestic burning, which increases microplastics in the air, landfill, which increases microplastics in the soil, and a lot of people who scavenge or scavengers who use microplastics to improve their quality of life. Now, this uses a lot of nuance because, yes, microplastics are bad for the environment. Yes, plastics are generally bad for the environment. However, they have vastly improved the quality of life for a lot of people who live in developing countries like Malaysia. And also the fact that countries like Malaysia are also one of the largest plastic producing industries. So they have to produce a lot of plastics, and earlier this presentation, a lot of microplastics are produced by plastic producing industries. Solutions to microplastics would be, for example, reducing the single-use plastic, right? Keeping people aware of recycling, converting waste to energy, creating alternatives, or banning plastics altogether. Now, there's some problems with these solutions, and yeah, they may be effective, but they may be somewhat of a problem. For example, keeping people aware of recycling, it may be effective because a lot of people, let's say in California where we have separated bins, right? A lot of people simply don't have the habit of recycling. Another way would be to convert waste into energy. A lot of waste to energy systems are very, very expensive to create, but it is an alternative to have plastic, but also convert that waste into energy. So then developing countries would be able to also produce power while also getting rid of their microplastic problem. Creating alternatives. Alternatives are a little bit more expensive than plastics. Plastics are very easy to produce, manufacture, very easy to carry around, very easy to throw away. So alternatives are a little bit more expensive, like for example glass. And things with plastics is that they don't degrade it that quickly. So things like paper products, they degrade very, very quickly. Now blending plastics altogether is a very, very good solution. However, a lot of developing countries need plastics to improve their quality of living. Um, yeah, and they're very, very cheap and easy to produce, like I said. Spectroscopic study on Raphanus sativus, so basically beets and radishes. Spectroscopic methods can be a more helpful tool when tracking microplastics. Um, Essentially, because there's no standardization of the system, this could be a good way to standardize the system. And it's essentially more effective since the spot for the observation of the microplastics is much, much smaller. So it ends up being less invasive and disruptive than other study methods. So it's able to essentially measure the amount of microplastics in a plant very accurately. Now, the spectroscopic study on radishes were essentially found that the radishes that were given microplastics ended up looking deformed. Plants that weren't treated with microplastics were very well developed, unsurprisingly. But they also concluded that the confocal Raman spectroscopy method can easily detect and measure microplastics. And this is very helpful because this is just another step forward to help uh, standardize the measurement of microplastics in our food, plants, and marine animals. This is my Salutations. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Have a good day.